She should be more aware, looking for moves that were more subtle and corrosive, less openly vindictive or explosive. His nature hasn't changed, Luke pointed out. I don't think you're missing much. And plenty of people missed everything about him, and you notice what a slimo he is. All true, and yet, there's no harm in verifying, Leia thought back at him. If it's the same, then I have a control I can check against. Her brother didn't like the thought, and Leia didn't blame him. She'd relied a lot so far on avoiding Palpatine, physically and socially. She didn't want him getting close to her, to start picking at her mind or her feelings. She wasn't sure how long she would last if he tried to rile her up, but she had to know. Or else she could miss something very important. You still play things pretty close, Shay said, dragging Leia from her thoughts. I'm not sure I could even begin to guess what you were thinking right now. No? Leia asked, a little flattered. She wasn't even really trying at the moment. Well, you've been giving that bird some nasty glares, Shia conceded, but I'm not sure what I'm supposed to make of that. You never know, Leia said. It could be an enemy bird. Shia rolled her eyes. Leia smiled, but was also a little sad. She'd been perfectly serious. The day was going badly enough when Padme got the request to join Bail for a surprise emergency meeting. Shmi was on calls all day preparing to leave the planet, and Leia had disappeared over lunch, sending only an obscure message about being the focus of a petty one-upmanship. Padme should have known what that was referring to, but she was tired. Exhausted, really. It was too much. So when she entered the room and Senator Ayek was also present, it wasn't exactly a surprise, but it was absolutely unwelcome. Senator Amidala. Bail seemed to sense her tension and stepped into the breach, gesturing to her seat and directing Airtay to a discreet location with his eyes. The formality was a hint and a warning. Thank you for joining us on such short notice. I hope Master Gallia will be here soon. You know Senator Ayek. Padme nodded, standing next to her seat but not taking it yet. The correct gesture, as the other man in the room stood when Bail said, "And this is Brigadier Tarkin." They exchanged bows, and the man waited for her to sit before doing the same. Very formal then, and not especially impressed with her presence. "I hope we won't be waiting long on the Jedi," he said, not quite sniffing. "I'm needed back at home. Imminently." "They're aware of the seriousness of the situation," Bail promised, his staff offering drinks. Padme accepted hers but placed it on the table untouched. "I understand Master Gallia is finishing a council meeting and will be arriving shortly." As if on cue, the doors slid open and Master Gallia strode in, taking time to allow the Brigadier to greet her as he had Padme, before sliding into her own seat. "I apologize for the delay. I understand you're here at Senator Ark's request to update us on Eriadu's position." She received a solemn nod. "We provided the order with the details about our security forces as requested, but no additional troops have been sent to our sector. I was hoping you could provide an explanation. And so is Senator Ayek." Padme made sure to study Master Gallia's concerned composure. "The explanation is simple enough. Your governor refused the troops and ships that we offered to send. He explained that the security the corporations had already hired was adequate and he didn't need further interference." The last word had a low emphasis to it, subtle to the point of being almost sublime. The Brigadier frowned. "My brother has a multitude of opinions on the subject of security, but it is not only Eriadu itself at risk. Malastar is already being threatened by the situation on Christophsis. If that system were to fall, there are no other major centers along the hyperlane to prevent the Separatists from controlling a path almost straight to the core, and back out again on the Hydean Way." A bit of a stretch, Padme thought, given how many smaller routes crossed spinward between those two major lanes. Naboo regularly made use of... Oh, that was why she was here. "Senator Ark has every right to ask questions to help ensure the security of his people," Master Gallia said, all graciousness. "But without Governor Tarkin's permission, we can't send any troops. It would be seen as a threat to his sovereignty and against the limited powers the Chancellor currently has to direct the military." Was an unbanked fury in Brigadier Tarkin's eyes. Sovereignty has hardly been an issue for the Jedi in the past. "Unflappable," Master Gallia said. The Jedi's jurisdiction is very clearly laid out in their agreement with the Republic. The files are all on public record, and if you have any questions or wish to file a complaint, I can of course direct you to the appropriate archives. Padme didn't wince, but she did make a note to have Airtaye go. Through the agreement and the list of formal complaints for at least the last 20 years. She'd like to believe the Jedi were aware of their position in the Republic and always acted appropriately. But she still remembered Master Jin's casual dismissal of the Queen's right to know. Among other things, would it be possible to station troops on Malastare? Senator Ayak cut in. We have plenty of space, and it would be a closer launching point if Governor Tarkin changed his mind. Master Gallia's tone hardened a touch. The Council has reviewed the information provided by Malastare and conducted its own evaluation of the security of the hyperlane, based on our own intelligence. Our position on placing troops on Malastare is currently unchanged, but if you have additional information to submit, it will of course be given top priority. I can direct you to the appropriate channels so that there is no delay. It's possible that important information has been missed, Senator Ayak stressed, but didn't accept Master Gallia's offer. The Jedi's information network isn't reviewed by the Senate. There is a chance. I can assure you that our information is accurate, up-to-date, and diverse, Master Gallia said, her tone composed even if she had interrupted. And expanding. The resources we've been provided by the Senate for the Army have allowed us to utilize those soldiers who are trained appropriately for that exact purpose. And we are training more, she added before Senator Ayak could make any more comments. Seeing that this is the current state of affairs, and any action taken on the Order's part will require more information or authorizations, as I've outlined, do you have any other questions? Gathering his thoughts, but Senator Ayak had no problem turning to Padme. Surely you agree that more focus should be paid to the Hydean Way? Naboo can hardly afford for the Republic to lose control of both lanes. It was tempting to snap back with an immediate disagreement. But aside from wanting to better imitate Master Gallia's composure, Padme did need to consider the impact to Naboo if they lost both lanes. Especially given that the RRM was providing so much support to the Refugee Committee. I think it would be helpful to have a better idea of the results of the Jedi's risk assessments, Padme offered, looking to Master Gallia. Or at least feedback about what systems we can be watching for so that we know what qualifies as urgent updates. I'm confident that Naboo currently has enough hyperspace routes that don't depend on the major lanes that we wouldn't see any immediate effects if there was unexpected trouble. But if there's concern over losing control of the two major lanes, we are well placed to keep an eye out for trouble, especially if the Separatists decide to use the routes we frequent between the two lanes. It was a relief to work with someone who could catch subtle messages. Master Gallia had looked to Bail and was nodding at Padme. Certainly. We already have some information from the cross-traffic through your system. But we can work on providing details to systems to expedite matters and create efficiencies. And what were the odds, given how much she'd already provided, that Leia would be called in to help with that matter? Padme needed to pay more attention. Leia was getting too involved again. Would that help address your concerns? Master Gallia asked Brigadier Tarkin and Senator Ayak. I'm sure Governor Tarkin would also appreciate more clarity on the matter. Brigadier Tarkin gave a long look to the senators in the room, then seemed to brace himself. I don't think you quite understand our concerns. Somehow, Padme didn't think our actually included Senator Ayak. The governor seems to think that he has insight into Count Dooku's objectives and that Eriadu is safe because we will not be made a target. Master Gallia frowned, but it was Bail who asked, I suppose he was contacted. At some point, like many systems were, to gauge Eriadu's interest in leaving the Republic. There was no accusation in the question, but the Brigadier looked like he was in pain as he nodded. It was some time ago. Before the question of military action had even been raised. It was a purely economic matter, I can assure you. But my brother, the governor, believes that the Count's promises to leave our system still stand, in spite of the changes. I'm assured, he added quickly, that the governor is completely loyal to the Republic and Chancellor Palpatine, and I have no reason to doubt this. I just worry that the governor has been mired in politics for so long that he's forgotten the efficacy of a military threat. And under the current circumstances, now he waved to Senator Ayak and Padme, there could be consequences beyond our system, which places this under the Republic's jurisdiction. Uncomfortable or merely contemplative? Master Gallia eventually said, if the governor did not include his contact with the Count in his initial risk report, I would recommend submitting it yourself. If the Jedi feel the need to obtain special permission from the Chancellor to act, it will be easier if we have this on record. And if Governor Tarkin is as loyal to the Chancellor as he claims, Master Gallia added with the barest hint of a smile, then hopefully the Chancellor's approval will carry enough weight that we can avoid any sort of disputation. I'll have it to you in the hour, the Brigadier promised. You have an expedited channel. I'll supply you with the contact, Master Gallia promised, standing. Shall we? The transport touched down on Eriadu's landing platform with a soft hydraulic hiss, and Leia stepped out into air that tasted of metal and ambition. Governor Tarkin had not come to greet them personally. He had sent his brother, the Brigadier, whose handshake was firm but whose eyes kept drifting toward the Chancellor's ship as though expecting a more important arrival. Senator Organa moved through the formalities with practiced ease. Senator Darsana followed, his long fingers occasionally twitching in patterns Leia had learned to read as amusement or irritation depending on the angle. Freepio shuffled behind them all, muttering about atmospheric composition and the inadvisability of polished protocol droids on industrial worlds. Leia kept her posture straight, her expression pleasant, her mind cataloguing every face, every uniform, every camera positioned along the walkway. She had done this before, in another life, under another name, in a galaxy that had already burned. The familiarity of it was both comfort and wound. The governor's palace was less a palace and more a fortress dressed in diplomatic clothing. Clean lines, expensive materials, security cameras disguised as decorative sconces. Leia noted the sight lines, the blind spots, the places where a person could disappear if they moved quickly enough. The kind that never truly went away. Dinner that evening was a performance. Governor Tarkin sat at the head of the table, the Chancellor at his right hand, and the arrangement of guests told its own story of power and intention. Leia was placed near the Chancellor, close enough to be observed, far enough to be dismissed. She recognized the tactic. She had used it herself in another time, against people she had needed to watch without being seen watching. The governor spoke of economic prosperity, of trade routes, of Eriadu's strategic importance. His words were polished, rehearsed, and utterly without warmth. Leia listened and smiled and ate very little, her fingers occasionally brushing the napkin in her lap in patterns that might have been nervousness to an observer, but were actually calculation. Counting exits. Measuring distances. Remembering the layout. You seem distracted, Lady Skywalker, the Chancellor said, his voice carrying that particular sweetness that had once made her skin crawl in a different decade. Is the cuisine not to your liking? The cuisine is excellent, Your Excellency, Leia answered, letting her smile remain small and polite. I was simply admiring the architecture. Governor Tarkin has clearly invested in making this space both beautiful and functional. Tarkin's smile was thin. Function and beauty are not mutually exclusive, Lady Skywalker. One simply requires the will to pursue both. Indeed, Leia said. And then, because she could feel the Chancellor's attention pressing against her like a physical weight, she turned to Senator Organa and asked about refugee transport routes, letting the conversation drift into safer waters. The evening wore on. The Chancellor made his speeches. Tarkin made his observations. Senator Darsana made his subtle commentary through finger movements that only Leia and 3PO could fully translate. And Leia sat in the middle of it all, feeling the years pressing against her ribs, feeling the weight of knowing exactly what this man beside her would become, what this governor would do, what this galaxy would suffer. She excused herself before dessert, citing fatigue from travel. The Chancellor's smile did not waver, but she felt his attention follow her like a hand on the back of her neck all the way to the door. In her quarters, Leia pressed her forehead against the cool wall and breathed. Luke was quiet in the back of her mind, a steady warmth that reminded her she was not alone. That she had never truly been alone, even in the worst moments. Tomorrow will be worse, she whispered. Tomorrow is always worse, Luke agreed gently. But you'll get through it. You always do. She wished she could believe him with the same certainty she'd had as a child. Back when the future was something that happened to other people. Back before she'd learned that the future was something you had to fight for, tooth and nail, with everything you had and everything you were willing to lose. The attack came 3 days later during a tour of the shipyards. Leia felt it before she saw it. A shift in the air, a wrongness in the rhythm of the machinery around them. The Force, which she had been learning to read in fragments and whispers, suddenly screamed. She grabbed Senator Darsana by the back of his robes and yanked them both behind the nearest assembly frame, just as the first blaster bolt scorched the floor where they had been standing. The sound that followed was mechanical, rhythmic, wrong. Droids, but not the standard battle models. These moved differently, faster, with a fluidity that suggested something more than simple programming. "Get down!" Commander Stone's voice cut through the chaos, sharp and commanding. Leia felt Sheltay being pulled to cover, felt the clones establishing a perimeter with the efficiency of long practice. The droids advanced in a pincer formation, their targeting systems locking onto the senators with mechanical precision. Leia counted 3 on the ground level, 2 more on the catwalks above. She could feel their electronic signatures in the Force, cold and purposeful, but there was something else underneath. A presence, something watching, something deciding. She moved before she thought, pulled her blaster, fired twice, dropped one of the ground units. The second turned toward her and she rolled, feeling the bolt pass close enough to singe the fabric of her sleeve. Behind her, she heard Darsana shout something in his native tongue, heard the distinctive crack of a clone's rifle finding its mark. The catwalk droids were the problem. They had the angle, the height, the ability to fire down into their cover without exposing themselves. Leia reached for the Force, not with the careful meditation Master Dralik had been teaching her, but with the raw instinct that had kept her alive through 100 engagements in another life. She grabbed the nearest support strut and pulled. Metal groaned, buckled, gave way. The catwalk section tilted, dropped, sent both droids tumbling into the assembly line below where they sparked and shattered against industrial equipment. "Clear!" Stone called. "Left side clear!" "Right side!" another clone confirmed. Leia stayed low, breathing hard, her blaster still raised. The silence that followed was worse than the noise. It meant something was coming. Something that hadn't announced itself with blaster fire. The wall exploded inward, not with fire, not with explosives, with 4 lightsabers, burning in colors she had seen only in nightmares. The figure that stepped through the breach was wrong in every way that mattered. Too many limbs, too many angles. A face that was more machine than flesh, eyes that burned with a cold intelligence that had nothing to do with droid programming. Grievous. The name surfaced from a place deep in her memory. From reports she had read in another timeline. From whispered conversations in the Alliance about the monster that hunted Jedi. She had never seen him. She had hoped she never would. "Cannot confirm hit on the target," the mechanical voice announced, scanning. "Searching for Priority 1. Priority 1. Not the Chancellor. Not the Senators. Someone specific. Someone whose death had been ordered from a very particular direction." Leia's blood went cold. "Move!" she shouted, grabbing Darsana again, dragging him toward the secondary exit. "Everyone move!" "Now!" The clones opened fire. Grievous moved through the bolts like water through fingers, his sabers spinning in patterns that defied geometry. Leia saw Stone take a hit to the shoulder, saw him go down, saw 2 of his brothers drag him back. Saw Sheltay pulling 3PO behind a support column, the protocol droid wailing about the inadvisability of being shot at. She couldn't fight this. Not here. Not with what she had. But she could run. Could buy time. Could get the senators out. 3PO, the service tunnel, left side, behind the assembly frame. "Oh, but Mistress Leia, that is clearly a maintenance access and not at all appropriate for—" "Move!" They ran. Leia at the back, firing over her shoulder whenever Grievous turned his attention their way. The droids followed, but more slowly now, their programming confused by the chaos. Grievous himself seemed focused on something else, scanning, searching, looking for a specific signature. Looking for her. The realization hit her like a physical blow. This wasn't about the Chancellor. This wasn't about the senators. This was about her. Someone had sent this thing specifically for her, and the only person who had both the means and the motive to deploy a Jedi killer in Republic space was... No. Not yet. She couldn't think about that yet. She had to get these people out. Had to get Darsana and Organa and Sheltay and 3PO and the clones to safety. Had to. The service tunnel was ahead. Narrow, dark, barely wide enough for two people to walk abreast. Leia shoved Darsana through first, then Sheltay, then the wounded clones supporting Stone. 3PO went next, still protesting. She turned back once. Grievous had reached the assembly frame. His mechanical eyes found her across the distance. Those burning eyes, those terrible, patient, hunting eyes. She fired 3 times, missed twice. The third bolt sparked off his shoulder plate, doing nothing. But it slowed him, just for a moment, just enough. She ran. They made it to the transport. Leia's hands were shaking as she helped load the wounded, as she counted heads, as she confirmed that everyone who had gone in was coming out. Stone's shoulder was bad, but treatable. 2 clones had minor injuries. 3PO had a scorch mark across his chest plate that he kept touching with one golden hand, murmuring about repairs. Darsana was pale but steady. He caught Leia's arm as she moved past him, his grip firm, his dark eyes searching her face. "You knew," he said quietly. "Not the specifics, but you knew something like this was possible." "I suspected," Leia corrected. She was exhausted. Her blaster hand was cramped. There was a burn on her forearm she hadn't noticed until now, small and angry and red. There were signs, the timing of our visit, the security gaps, the way the Chancellor positioned us. And you came anyway. Someone had to. He studied her for a long moment. Then he released her arm and stepped back, giving her space. But his expression said he was filing this away, adding it to whatever growing file he kept on Leia Skywalker. The file that was getting thicker and more complicated by the month. The transport lifted off. Below them, the shipyard burned. Above them, the sky was empty and cold and indifferent. Leia pressed her forehead against the viewport and watched Eriadu shrink. Felt Luke's presence settle around her like a blanket. Felt the exhaustion finally catching up, pulling her down toward sleep. She had known since the moment she'd stepped off that transport and felt the wrongness in the air. Known that this was a message, a test, a reminder that she was being watched, that she was not safe, that she would never be safe as long as he sat in that office, smiling his patient, poisonous smile. But knowing and proving were different things. Knowing and acting were different things. And right now, surrounded by wounded soldiers and frightened senators and a protocol droid who kept asking if they were quite sure they were safe now, Leia did not have the luxury of acting. Dreamed of green fire and cold metal and a voice that whispered, "You may fire when ready." Woke with tears on her face and the taste of ash in her mouth. Did not let anyone see. Back on Coruscant, the political machinery ground forward with its usual indifferent efficiency. The attack on Eriadu made the news feeds, briefly. Governor Tarkin issued a statement expressing regret for the security failure and confidence in the Republic's ability to protect its citizens. The Chancellor expressed outrage and promised a thorough investigation. Senator Darsana gave a carefully worded interview that managed to convey concern without assigning blame. And Padme, who had been monitoring events from her office with the particular intensity she reserved for matters involving people she loved, called Leia the moment the transport docked. "You're alive," Padme said by way of greeting. Her face on the holo was tight, controlled, but her eyes were red-rimmed. She had been crying. Recently. "I'm alive," Leia confirmed. Shmi called. 3 times. I had to tell her you were in transit and couldn't answer. She was not pleased. Shmi is never pleased when I'm in transit. No, Padme agreed. She is not. Come home, please. Before she comes to collect you personally. Leia almost smiled. Almost. I'll be there within the hour. She was. She walked into the apartment and was immediately enveloped in Shmi's arms, held tight enough to bruise, pressed against a shoulder that smelled of engine grease and the particular herbal tea Shmi favored. Luke's presence flared warm and bright in Leia's mind, and she felt her grandmother's love like a physical force, fierce and unconditional and slightly furious. "You are reckless," Shmi said into Leia's hair. "I'm alive," Leia repeated. "These are not mutually exclusive. You can be both reckless and alive. You can be reckless and dead. I would prefer the former, but I would prefer neither." It came out wet and broken and nothing like a laugh at all. But Shmi held her tighter and didn't comment. And after a while, the shaking stopped. And after a while, Leia could breathe. And after a while, she could let herself be held. The legal case moved forward with the glacial inevitability of all Senate bureaucracy. Padme and her team had compiled their arguments. The citizenship question had been framed carefully, wrapped in language that emphasized Republic values and legal precedent rather than moral outrage. Because moral outrage, as Padme had learned long ago, was a poor substitute for legal standing. "We need the Order's cooperation," Padme told Bail over a secure channel. Her voice was steady, professional, but there was an undercurrent of something harder. Determination, maybe. Or the particular variety of anger that Padme had learned to compress into useful shapes. If the court rules that the clones fall under the Order's jurisdiction by virtue of their acquisition and deployment, the Senate can't simply table the vote. They'll have to address it. And if the Order doesn't cooperate, then we go to the floor anyway. We force the vote. We make them go on record. Bail was quiet for a moment. "The Chancellor will fight this. The Chancellor fights everything. That doesn't mean we stop." Another silence. Then, softly, "No, it doesn't. What do you need from me? If the vote goes to the floor, I need Alderaan to stand with Naboo, not behind, with." "You'll have it." Thank you. Don't thank me. You're right. And being right is worth more than being comfortable." Padme ended the call and sat in the quiet of her office, feeling the weight of what she was doing settle over her like a mantle. This was bigger than a vote, bigger than a legal case. This was the shape of the Republic's future, being decided in conference rooms and court chambers and the quiet spaces between. She thought of Anakin on Ryloth, doing what he could with what he had. Thought of Obi-Wan, preparing for his testimony. Thought of Leia, who had walked into a trap because walking into traps was apparently her primary method of problem solving. Thought of Shmi, who held them all together with tea and stubbornness, and a love so fierce it could bend the Force itself. She thought of the clones, of Rex and Cody and all the others whose names she was learning, slowly, carefully, one at a time. Of the fact that they were people, that they had always been people, and that the Republic had spent years pretending otherwise because it was convenient. She opened her datapad, began drafting her floor speech. The words came slowly at first, then faster. Then all at once, like a dam breaking. Like all the anger she'd been holding back since Geonosis, since the MCA, since the first time she'd seen a clone and known with absolute certainty that something was fundamentally wrong with a system that could create. People for the sole purpose of spending their lives in service to a government that wouldn't even acknowledge their existence. She wrote until her hand cramped. Then she kept writing. On Mandalore, the situation deteriorated with the slow inevitability of a wound that refuses to heal. Duchess Satine's pacifist government held, but the cracks were widening. Death Watch grew bolder. Their attacks became more frequent, more targeted, more personal. And the people of Mandalore, who had once believed in the promise of a peaceful future, began to wonder if peace was something that could be maintained without the means to defend it. Obi-Wan received his recall orders on a Tuesday. He read them twice, standing in the corridor outside his quarters, feeling the weight of them settle into his bones. Christophsis was escalating. The 212th was needed. And Ahsoka, his Padawan, his responsibility, was still too young and too untrained for what was coming. He thought of Leia, who had once told him that wars were won in the spaces between battles, in the supply lines and the communication networks and the quiet decisions made in rooms far from the front. He thought of Padme, who was fighting a different kind of war in the Senate. He thought of Anakin, who was learning, the hard way, what it meant to be responsible for other people's lives. He thought of Satine, who had once been the closest thing he had to an equal, who had challenged him and infuriated him and made him question everything he thought he knew about duty and love and the shape of a life well lived, who was now facing the consequences of a philosophy that had been tested by war and found, by many of her own people, wanting. He packed his things, said his goodbyes, boarded the transport that would take him back to the front. And in the quiet of hyperspace, he allowed himself to feel, for just a moment, the full weight of everything he was carrying. The war, the order, the republic, the people he loved and the people he'd lost and the people he was terrified of losing. Then he breathed, let it go. Not because it was easy, because it was necessary, because there was work to do. There was always work to do. And Obi-Wan Kenobi, for all his doubts and fears and quiet grief, had never been the sort of person to walk away from work that needed doing. The days that followed the attack on Alderaan blurred together in a haze of Bacta and silence. Leia drifted between consciousness and sleep, the sting of healing salve on her face, a constant reminder of how close she had come to something far worse. Shmi was there when she woke, and there when she fell back under. Padme visited twice, bringing soft words and softer blankets. Obi-Wan sent a message through the Order's channels, brief and formal, but the concern underneath was unmistakable. It was Anakin who surprised her. He showed up 3 days after the incident, still in his flight suit, grease streaked across his jaw. He stood in the doorway of the medical wing for a long moment, watching her sleep, before Shmi gently ushered him to a chair beside the bed. "You look terrible," Leia said when she finally opened her eyes. "You look worse," he shot back, but his voice was thin, worried. "I got shot at. You flew through an asteroid field last week. We're even." "We're not even." "You got shot at because of me." That stopped her. Leia turned her head slowly, studying his face. The guilt was there, raw and unguarded, the way it always was with Anakin. He wore his emotions like open wounds. "It wasn't because of you," she said carefully. "It was Jango Fett. He was after the data I pulled from Geonosis. If you hadn't pulled that data, we'd still be blind to what the Separatists are building. You did the right thing." Leia reached out, pressing her fingers against his forearm. The contact was brief, but it grounded them both. "I made my own choices, Anakin. I chose to be on that station. I chose to fight. You don't get to carry that from me." He looked at her for a long time. Then he nodded once and let out a breath. He seemed to have been holding since he walked in. "Shmi says you need to rest. Shmi says a lot of things, and you should listen to her. I'm listening right now, aren't I?" He almost smiled. Almost. Then he stood, pressing a brief kiss to her forehead before pulling away. "Get better, Leia. Please." She watched him go, the door sliding shut behind him, and felt something shift in her chest. Something warm and aching and impossibly fragile. Recovery was slow. The burn on Leia's face healed, but the scar it left was thin and pale, a line that caught the light when she turned her head. Shmi traced it once with her fingertip, gentle as a prayer, and said nothing. There was nothing to say. They both knew what it meant, that Leia had survived, that she carried the mark of it. The Jedi Council requested a formal debrief once Leia was cleared for light duty. Master Gallia conducted the interview herself, calm and methodical, walking Leia through every moment on the station. The arrival, the dinner, the attack, Grievous, the escape. "You engaged 4 battle droids in close quarters," Master Gallia noted, her tone carefully neutral, "with a blaster and no armor. I had the element of surprise. You also had a senator to protect. I had a friend to protect." Leia corrected firmly. "Senator Darsana is not a political asset. He is a person I care about." Master Gallia studied her for a moment, then nodded. Noted. "And the data you retrieved? Transferred to the Order's intelligence division, all of it. Factory schematics, production schedules, communication logs, everything I could carry, including the Death Star plans." The question landed like a physical blow. Leia kept her face neutral, her breathing even. Including all technical schematics recovered from the primary research terminal. Yes. You understand the significance of what you found. I understand that it is a weapon of unprecedented scale. And I understand that if it is completed, no system in the galaxy will be safe. Leia met Master Gallia's gaze steadily, including yours. The silence that followed was heavy. Master Gallia set down her stylus and folded her hands. The Council is aware of the implications. Steps are being taken. Are they sufficient? That is not for me to say. It should be. Leia leaned forward. Master Gallia, I was inside that facility. I saw the production lines. I saw the resource allocation. This is not a theoretical threat. This is active, ongoing construction. Every day we delay is a day they get closer to completion. Master Gallia was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, I will bring your concerns to the full council. But Leia, you must understand, we are stretched thin. The war is consuming every resource we have. The clones, the ships, the supply lines. We cannot simply redirect an entire fleet to assault a single installation without intelligence confirming its exact location and readiness. Then get the intelligence. Send scouts. Send me. You are not a Jedi. But I am the person who has been inside that facility and walked out alive. That counts for something. Master Gallia regarded her with an expression Leia couldn't quite read. Admiration, perhaps, or pity. It counts for a great deal, she said softly, and it is precisely why I will not send you back. Not yet. You are valuable, Leia. Alive and functional. Do not make me lose you to a heroic gesture. Leia held her tongue. She wanted to argue, to push, to demand action, but she could hear the sincerity underneath the caution. Master Gallia was not dismissing her. She was trying to keep her alive. It was, Leia realized, more than most people bothered to do. The political fallout from the Iriadu incident was swift and ugly. Governor Tarkin issued a formal statement blaming the attack on separatist aggression and Republic negligence, carefully omitting any mention of Leia's role in the defense. Chancellor Palpatine expressed deep concern and promised a thorough investigation, which everyone understood meant nothing would actually change. Senator Darsana was less restrained. In a closed session of the Loyalist Committee, he laid out the timeline of the attack with surgical precision, noting that the station's security protocols had been compromised hours before the assault began. He implied, without quite saying, that someone on the inside had facilitated the breach. The implication hung in the air like smoke. No one wanted to be the one to name it. Padme, watching from her pod, felt the familiar cold settle in her stomach. She thought of Rush Clovis, of his easy smiles and easier promises. She thought of the banking clan's fingerprints on half the legislation that had gutted the Republic's regulatory frameworks. She thought of the Chancellor, who had been on Eriadu when the attack happened, who had left before the fighting started, who had returned to Coruscant with a statement already prepared. She did not say any of this aloud, not yet. But she wrote it down in a personal journal encrypted with a cipher only she and Sabe knew, just in case. On Mandalore, the situation deteriorated with the slow inevitability of a wound that refuses to heal. Duchess Satine's pacifist government held, but the cracks were widening. Death Watch grew bolder. Their attacks became more frequent, more targeted, more personal. And the people of Mandalore, who had once believed in the promise of a peaceful future, began to wonder if peace was something that could be maintained without the means to defend it. Obi-Wan received his recall orders on a Tuesday. He read them twice, standing in the corridor outside his quarters, feeling the weight of them settle into his bones. Christophsis was escalating. The 2/12 was needed. And Ahsoka, his Padawan, his responsibility, was still too young and too untrained for what was coming. He thought of Leia, who had once told him that wars were won in the spaces between battles, in the supply lines and the communication networks and the quiet decisions made in rooms far from the front. He thought of Padme, who was fighting a different kind of war in the Senate. He thought of Anakin, who was learning the hard way what it meant to be responsible for other people's lives. He thought of Satine, who had once been the closest thing he had to an equal. who had challenged him and infuriated him and made him question everything he thought he knew about duty and love and the shape of a life well lived, who was now facing the consequences of a philosophy that had been tested by war and found, by many of her own people, wanting. He packed his things, boarded the transport that would take him back to the front, and in the quiet of hyperspace he allowed himself to feel, for just a moment, the full weight of everything he was carrying. The war, the order, the people he loved and the people he lost and the people he was terrified of losing. Then he breathed, let it go. Not because it was easy, because it was necessary, because there was work to do. There was always work to do. And Obi-Wan Kenobi, for all his doubts and fears and quiet grief, had never been the sort of person to walk away from work that needed doing. The vote on clone citizenship was a disaster. It was almost as though the moment Padme had been able to inform her allies about the emergency powers, they went from rumor to a completely formed and proofread nightmare in a matter of hours. There had been plenty of no votes, but Padme and Bail and Mon and Shi and Darsana hadn't had time to employ a full strategy to combat the fear-mongering. The Order had been called into question for being too self-important, and Palpatine had been granted personal access to ongoing investigations by the Coruscant Guard and internal investigations in the GAR. There was a bitter taste of failure as they all went home that night, Leia immediately retreating to her room, saying she needed to practice meditation. Padme hoped that wasn't a lie, that Leia wasn't offering a convenient excuse to avoid Padme. Shmi didn't go with Leia, so she at least thought it was better if Leia was actually alone. "You'll be heading out again soon?" Etae asked. 2 days, Shmi said. "Not actively going into war zones this time, I hope. I'll be checking placement locations, making sure they're doing what they say they are." "Going alone?" "Oh no. They gave me an entire team to babysit on the journey. How can I ever repay them?" That meant she was getting a mix of workers that were in the committee for the cause, and at least a handful that were there to be asinine about budgets. Padme almost wished they hadn't brought Shmi into this. Then she remembered all the good that had been done and was just achingly grateful. "Will you get to see Anakin?" Padme asked. "It's unlikely," Shmi admitted. "But I'll get to see many of the brothers, which is good. We're working on getting as many of the decommissioned casualties as possible, integrated with businesses Senator Sadashasa is connected to help with the droid part extraction, given their experience." "Is that safe?" Dorme asked. "Safer than having them on the battlefield," Shmi said, "and safer for anyone they fly with." "And they'll get paid," Sabe noted, which is a huge improvement over them being in the army. "They are getting citizenship on a number of planets besides Alderaan. Glee Anselm has actually volunteered to take as many as 10,000. That doesn't sound like an ideal place for them to settle down," Dorme noted. "Camino is a planet mostly submerged under an ocean," Shmi said. "The brothers don't all miss it, but those that do are happy to go to Glee Anselm instead. And there's work for them fighting pirates there as well. Not just active combat, but using their experience to predict and avoid conflict. There aren't enough of them yet to know how well this will work in the long run, but so far it's at least holding." Casualties from battles were mostly deaths, Padme knew. Not exact figures, but she'd heard enough to know the Order was furious with the Senate. Medical care was difficult to come by, and the funding arguments were disgusting. Feed the army, yes, give them weapons, sure. But if they died? Medicine and prosthetics were expensive. Bacta wasn't always easy to come by for average citizen. What obligation did the Senate have to provide it to soldiers who weren't even that? Only a stupid few had said the quiet part out loud, that it would be easier at the end of the war the fewer soldiers there were left. Sabe had had to physically stop Padme from punching that senator. Leia had been right. "At least the retrieval seems to be working," Padme grumbled. They hadn't had many volunteers yet, but those that had gone in for droid scraps had come out with large piles of cash, even after the Republic tax. More volunteers were signing up, Padme knew, which would hopefully help solve some of the budgeting problems, as long as the banking clans stopped trying to raise the ceiling on the debt the Senate could owe them. Damn Rush and his greedy, spineless motives. Padme regretted ever having met him. Leia woke with a crick in her neck and her whole upper body shivering. She'd fallen asleep at the table. Again. "You could stop practicing in the middle of the night when you can't sleep," Shmi said. not even looking over her shoulder to see if Leia was awake. Leia groaned a little, taking the blanket wrapped around her shoulders and draping it over her chair. Then she made herself move to help. Leaving Shmi alone in the kitchen would mean big trouble later. If I don't practice then, it doesn't always happen, Leia admitted. Besides, the sooner I pick this up, the sooner you can start avoiding the order again, Shmi finished, letting Leia take her place at the stove. Will they let you? If I'm not a danger to anyone, I don't know how they can stop me, Leia said. Even if they were willing or able to change the rules to let me join, that isn't something I have any interest in. And I've already made that clear, Shmi hummed as she set the table. If they made an exception and your vows were less demanding? If they invented a new position? Leia frowned as she started dishing the food. I can't even imagine what the consequences of that would be. It wouldn't make sense to do it for just me. Maybe if there were others. Like me? Shmi asked as she took her seat. Do you want to be a Jedi? No, Shmi said, placid. I do not, huffing Leia said. Then I don't think that changes much. Shmi's smile was warm and teasing, and if Leia weren't so tired, she'd have been twice as happy to see it. It was still soothing, as things were. When they'd finished eating and cleaning up, Shmi stopped Leia before she could go and get ready. I have something for you. Oh? Leia was surprised to see that Shmi looked uncertain. Shmi gestured for Leia's hand, and Leia offered it, letting her curiosity prickle as Shmi put something small into Leia's palm. It was a small pendant on a cord. Hand-carved, if Leia had to guess. Probably by Shmi herself. The symbols carved onto it didn't mean much to her, though she recognized some of them. They'd been painted onto the ceiling of the farm on Tatooine, designs that were easy on the eyes, soothing. There was something peaceful about the little pendant, something hopeful, something full of love. Brushing her fingers over it, Leia asked, You made this? For me? It's traditional, Shmi said, her voice very, very soft. Anakin lost his in a pod race, but walked away without a scratch. I meant to offer you one some time ago, but I wasn't sure, until we'd already left, if you'd like Jabor. And I think the Nerf horn suits you better. Leia felt a slight catch in her throat as she weighed the charm in her hand. Does it? She asked, her voice barely escaping her lips. They stared at each other for a moment, and then Shmi stepped forward, taking the necklace and reaching to tie it around Leia's neck. The pendant hit beneath her collarbone, easy enough to hide if Leia chose. Yes, Shmi said, stepping back. It does. Leia touched the pendant, feeling the smooth grain of the horn against her fingertips. She thought of Luke, who had worn a similar charm once, before everything. She thought of Anakin, who had lost his in a race and never replaced it. She thought of all the things that were given freely, without expectation, simply because someone cared enough to make them. Thank you, Leia whispered. Shmi kissed her forehead. You are my family, she said simply. Whatever else you are, whatever else you carry, you are mine, and I am yours. Let the words settle into her bones. Let them fill the spaces that had been empty for so long, she whispered back. The days on Naboo bled into one another, each marked by the slow erosion of hope and the steady accumulation of loss. Anakin stood at the edge of the Lake District, watching the distant flashes of laser fire paint the horizon in sickly orange bursts. The droids were pushing again. They were always pushing again. Rex appeared at his shoulder, silent as a shadow. Another wave from the south. General Tarpals is holding, but he's asking for reinforcements. We don't have them, Anakin said. The words tasted like ash. We've got the Gungans. The Gungans are dying, Rex. Anakin turned, and the look on his face made Rex take a half step back. Every time we send them out, we lose more. Every single time. Rex was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, The Queen's people are asking about the supply runs. They want to know if we can push further into Theed. Theed is a death trap. Theed is where the food is. Anakin closed his eyes. He could feel it, the slow, grinding pressure of the siege, the way it was squeezing the life out of everything. The civilians were hungry. The soldiers were exhausted. The Gungans were bleeding out in the water, their numbers dwindling with every underwater skirmish. And somewhere above them, in the cold black of space, Jango Fett was still fighting. Still trying to break through the siege cruisers, still trying to get his people down to the surface. Anakin had promised Boba he would see his father. He had promised the boy, looking into those dark, angry eyes that were so much like Jango's, that help was coming. He wasn't sure anymore if that promise was something he could keep. "Get me a line to the Queen," Anakin said, "and find Ahsoka. I need her in the command center in 20 minutes. Anakin stayed at the edge of the water, watching the lights flicker and die in the distance. He thought of Padme, asleep in her room, her breathing slow and even. He thought of Leia, so far away, a pinprick of light in the back of his mind that he could barely reach anymore. He thought of his mother on some transport between stars, probably worrying about him, probably wondering if he was eating, sleeping, taking care of himself. He wasn't. Not really. But he was trying. That had to count for something. Leia felt the moment something changed. She was in the middle of a meeting with Senator Dasana and Shay, going over budget allocations for the scrapping project, when the sensation hit her like a physical blow. A sharp, burning pain behind her ribs, followed by an overwhelming wave of grief so sudden and so absolute that she actually gripped the edge of the table to keep from falling. "Leia?" Dasana's voice came from very far away. "Leia, are you?" "I'm fine," she managed. The lie was automatic, practiced, but her hands were shaking and she couldn't make them stop. Shay was already standing, moving toward her. "You're not fine. What happened?" Leia didn't know. That was the worst part. She didn't know what had happened, only that something had, something terrible. Something that had reached across the stars and caught her in the chest like a hook. She reached inward, searching for the familiar warmth of Anakin's presence. The steady, burning light that she had grown so accustomed to feeling, even at this distance. She found nothing. Not dim, not distant. Nothing. Something's wrong with... She couldn't finish. Couldn't say his name. Couldn't give voice to the fear that was crawling up her throat like bile. Dasana was saying something, his long fingers moving in quick, sharp gestures that 3PO would have translated as urgent concern. Shay was touching her arm, asking questions. The room was spinning. Leia made herself stand, made herself breathe, made herself lock the fear down deep where it couldn't reach her face or her voice. "I need to go to the temple," she said. Now. She was already moving. Rise fell into step behind her, his presence a steady, grounding weight. She didn't look back. Couldn't look back. If she looked back, she would see the worry on their faces, and she would break. She couldn't break. Not yet. Not until she knew. The temple was quiet when she arrived, the halls empty in the way they always were in the late evening. Master Gallia met her at the entrance, her expression carefully neutral in a way that told Leia everything she needed to know before a single word was spoken. "You felt it," Master Gallia said. Not a question. Master Gallia hesitated. Just a fraction of a second. But Leia caught it, the tiny flicker of uncertainty, and it terrified her more than any battle ever had. "Senator Organa's ship was attacked," Master Gallia said. "The Tantive III. They received a distress signal, and then, nothing. The signal simply stopped." She caught herself on the wall, her fingers digging into the smooth stone. "And Anakin? We don't know. Communication with Naboo has been intermittent at best. We haven't been able to reach General Skywalker in." Master Gallia checked something. Almost 6 hours. 6 hours. 6 hours of silence. 6 hours of not knowing. Leia pressed her forehead against the cool wall and breathed. In, out, the way Shmi had taught her, the way Luke had taught her, the way she had taught herself in the dark, alone, when there was no one else to show her how. She said, "Leia, I need to reach him." Master Gallia studied her for a long moment, then she stepped aside. "The meditation room is open. I'll have Master Kun join you. He may be able to help stabilize the connection." Leia didn't wait. She walked, then ran faster, her footsteps echoing off the stone walls like a heartbeat. Rice was behind her, keeping pace, saying nothing. She burst into the meditation room and dropped to her knees in the center of the floor, closed her eyes. Reached. The darkness was absolute. Not the comfortable darkness of sleep, or the warm darkness of Luke's presence tucked safely behind her ribs. This was the darkness of absence, of void, of a space where something should be and wasn't. She reached further, deeper, past the fear, past the grief, past the burning rage that threatened to swallow her whole. She reached for the tiny, flickering light that was Anakin Skywalker, and she found nothing. Not dim, not hidden, not sleeping. Gone. "No," Leia whispered. "No, no, no." She reached again, and again, and again. Each time the darkness pressed back heavy and absolute, and each time she pushed harder, pouring everything she had into the effort. Her love, her rage, her stubborn, stupid, impossible hope. And on the fourth try, so faint she almost missed it, she felt something. Not Anakin. Not exactly, but a trace, an echo. Like the afterimage of a star that had already burned out, still reaching her across the void because the light hadn't finished traveling yet. He was alive. She was almost sure he was alive. But he was so far away, and the darkness between them was so vast. Leia opened her eyes. Master Kun was watching her from the doorway, his expression grave. Master Gallia stood behind him, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. "He's alive," Leia said. Her voice was raw, broken, but certain. "I think he's alive, but I can't reach him. Not like this. Not from here." Master Kun stepped into the room. "The connection you built with General Skywalker is remarkable, Leia, but it requires proximity, or at least a clear path. If there's interference, if the signal is being jammed, then I need to get closer." The silence that followed was heavy. Master Gallia and Master Kun exchanged a look that Leia couldn't read. "That's not possible right now," Master Gallia said carefully. "The hyperlanes are contested. The Separatist presence in the Naboo system is significant. We can't risk sending you. I don't care what you can't risk." Leia was on her feet now, and she could feel the anger building, hot and bright and terrible. "I don't care about your risk assessments or your strategic calculations or your bureaucratic nonsense. He is alive. He is there, and I am going to get to him." "Leia." Master Kun's voice was gentle, firm. "I understand what you're feeling, but acting on impulse. Don't you dare tell me what I'm feeling." The words came out like a blade. "Whoa, whoa. Don't you dare stand there and tell me that you understand what it's like to reach for someone and find nothing, to feel them slip away and not be able to. Not be able to." She stopped. Swallowed. The rage was still there, burning behind her eyes, but she forced it down, forced it into her bones, her blood, the deep places where she kept all the things she couldn't afford to feel. "I'm going to Naboo," she said, quietly, calmly, with the absolute certainty of a woman who had already made her decision and would not be moved. "Find me a ship, find me a pilot, find me a way. I don't care how. I don't care what it costs. I'm going to Naboo." Master Gallia opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. "I'll speak to the council," she said finally. "I can't promise anything." "I'm not asking you to promise anything," Leia said. "I'm telling you what's going to happen." She turned and walked out. Rise followed, silent as ever. Behind her, she heard Master Kun say something low and urgent to Master Gallia, but she didn't stop, didn't look back. She had a ship to find. Padme woke to the sound of explosions, not the distant, muffled thump she had grown accustomed to over the past weeks. These were close. Close enough to rattle the windows. Close enough to send a fine rain of dust drifting down from the ceiling. She was out of bed and reaching for her blaster before she was fully conscious, her body moving on instinct honed by years of practice. Sabe was already at the door, her own weapon drawn, her face set in the grim, focused expression that meant she was running through threat assessments at lightning speed. "Where?" Padme demanded. Droids had broken through the Gungan line. Sabe's voice was tight, controlled. But Padme could hear the fear underneath. "Anakin's already there. He left 20 minutes ago." 20 minutes. Padme had been asleep. Anakin had left without waking her. Something twisted in her chest. Not anger exactly. Something worse. The knowledge that he had looked at her sleeping face and decided not to disturb her. That he had chosen to carry this alone rather than share the burden. It was sweet. It was infuriating. It was so perfectly, achingly Anakin that Padme wanted to scream. "Get me to the command center," she said. "And find Airtaye. I want a full situation report in 10 minutes. "Yes, Senator." Padme dressed quickly, pulling on the practical clothes she had taken to wearing during the siege.